Helena, for bringing us universal human truths here on the screen. I think we recognize them in ourselves, you know. I think we have some form of cellular memory. In a way, we are a little bit of the way there because we're New Yorkers. You know, all the surveys show that New Yorkers are happier than any other urban group in the nation. And I think it's because we don't have to get into tin cans by ourselves and drive for an hour and a half. We know the shoe repair person, we know the delicatessen person. I mean, you know, it is fundamental, and it's certainly fundamental to social justice movements, because the only transformative group is a small group, really, in which, I mean, it was the heart of the civil rights movement in churches and the women's movement and rap groups, and now we call them book clubs, and it's AA around the world, Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. I mean, this is a small group of people who can talk. Each person can speak and all can listen, is the only transformative body we know. So, you know, I think we're reaching for this in all kinds of ways, and we have all kinds of things to build on. We're all going to change our bank accounts tomorrow. Thanks. I think we probably in this room all came to this curiosity, feeling, impulse, understanding in all kinds of different ways. I owe it mainly to the activists in the women's movement who came from Indian country and therefore who just knew all this, you know, that I didn't know, you know, so they would come into my house and say, try not to eat anything that is shelf life older than your own. Or they would discover I went to school in Massachusetts, you know, so they would say, well, did you ever see a milpa? I believe that's the right word. Milpa was the original way that farming was done on at least much of this subcontinent, which meant that there were little circles of plants like this, you know, and in the center was corn, and then there were beans growing up and clinging to the corn, and there were, which put nitrogen back in the soil, there were plants that, flowering plants that were insecticide or pesticide in effect, and so the, you know, the fields, and actually I went near my college, and you can still see the fields. They look like big bath mats, you know, circle, 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 circle. And there are fields of this kind in Central America that have been being planted for, as far as anybody knows, 3,000 years, and they're still fertile. Because there's a deep understanding of the cycle and what to put back in the soil and so on. I mean, you know, I really, the knowledge is there. It is present. And to me, just as a wanderer, it's mostly present, or it's most present, in what I think of as original cultures, because Aboriginal is misused, and so, you know, so I think the oldest cultures, you know, truly the original cultures, where you know, the small group is the legislative body. You might say it's the first legislative body. I mean, our Constitution was, of course, based on the Iroquois Confederacy and that kind of circular structure in which there was a certain amount of autonomy, and then there were layers of consultative groups and so on. And, of course, they forgot to include the women when they, you know, and the slaves and so on. But there were two people from the Iroquois Confederacy in Philadelphia advising us on our Constitution. I mean, I'm saying this only because I think that there, for 95% of human history, I mean, up to 600 years ago on this continent, up to 3,000 to 5,000 years in the rest of the world, there were extremely sophisticated cultures with governance systems, with no gender in the language. Isn't that interesting? For instance, in Cherokee there's no gender. How did we get so crazy as to give gender to tables and chairs, I would like to know? I think I know why. and the structures and the cultures are there. So maybe we should just declare the last 600 to 3,000 years an experiment that failed, and declare this the first meeting of the post-hierarchical, post-globalization, the whole thing, right? Post-racism, post-nationalism. I don't want to go on, but I do want to say one thing, which I think we all know, but I think we need to make the invisible visible. And especially because it's the inconvenient truth about the inconvenient truth, so I feel like I always have to say, which is that the most basic form of local control is controlling one's own physical self. And how we got in this jam of overpopulation. I mean, Europe became the pioneer of hierarchy, patriarchy, racism, because it got overpopulated. Then it invented racism to justify taking over by colonialism and imperialism other people's land and so on. Well, these folks are inferior, they can't, you know. So I think we do need to say and remember that the ability of each person, each family, each, you know, to decide for themselves when and whether to have children is absolutely crucial, because it is primarily overpopulation that is driving the impossible overload on this spaceship Earth that we love so much. I mean, overpopulation is the big, and it is mainly unwanted population. In every situation I know of, and all over the world, if you allow, even with all the pro-natalist pressure and even with everything that's in the culture, if you allow and make it possible for women, and hopefully women and families together, to make this decision, the population rate comes out at just slightly above, within 10 years, at just slightly above replacement level. We have forced through culture, you know, what happens to women is called culture, what happens to men is called politics, but actually it's all politics. Where, you know, we forced people to have more children than they want, and through dependency, through all the systems, through the multiple marriage, you know, we have forced a huge population growth that is unwanted. And one of the clear precepts of the original cultures I know about, anyway, is that there should always be more grown-ups than children. Because otherwise, children cannot be properly loved and held and made secure. And they can't properly learn because we do what we see, you know, so kids have to be around, you know, to be able to see and to learn. And you know, if you think about it, all the areas of the world and our own country where there are, the most violence are the places where there are far more young people than adults. And there's not enough love and security and ability to hold them, and there's not enough jobs, and there's not, you know. So it's fundamental, and it kind of gets left out in part because it's controversial. So I just want to remind us that is basic, and that we have within our own grasp the ability to both change our own lives and be examples. because we all do what we see, not what we're told, you know? And if you can't see it, you can't be it. And if you start making the change, the people who see you will make the change too.